Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be talking to you again and having Flo here, Flo Page from Vetsure, Head of Business Development. My name is Nick Lloyd. I'm Chief Veterinary Officer for Lupa and a practicing veterinary surgeon. And I'll let Flo introduce herself.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so my role is Head of Business Development at Vetsure. So Vetsure is a group that supports independent clinics across kind of three different service lines. So we have our buying group, Buysure. We administer pet health plans. We also offer pet insurance too. My background is I was also a vet. I was a large animal vet based in the Southwest. And then when I moved into industry, I went into sales and then into marketing. That's me.
Yes, and as I said, my name is Nick Lloyd. I'm Chief Veterinary Officer from Lupa. I'm still a practicing vet. And at Lupa, we're trying to bring a new generation of PMS into the marketplace, making life easier for clinics and bring AI into into their daily workflow. But today we're talking about health plans, smart pricing, and reputation management for independent vet practices, particularly in light of the CMA potential findings and recommendations, which should be coming out in the next few weeks. To start with, we're going to chat about health plans. So, something you guys have a lot of experience with. What are your thoughts about what practice should be doing in the current marketplace?
Yeah, so as I said, we administer pet health plans on behalf of practices, but this goes beyond in that we do get very involved with this. And it's a topic I'm kind of passionate about personally as well. So I think pet health plans are amazing. They are such a good opportunity to bond clients to the practice, but also to drive animal welfare. You know, every health plan is ultimately based around giving easy access to routine preventative healthcare for pets and allowing pet owners to budget accordingly. And they also give a regular revenue stream for practices. So if a practice doesn't have a health plan, which there are still some practices out there, then I would strongly recommend looking at launching one, finding a good administrator, or if you're going to do it yourself, getting some advice on what to include and what not to include, because there's lots of different models that I think we're going to go on and talk about to put in there. But yeah, definitely, first off, have a health plan. It helps you bond clients to the practice and helps kind of make your staff feel good that they're providing this great care to your pet owners.
Yes, I mean, health plans have gone through an evolution. When I first joined as a practicing vet, they weren't a known thing, and then it became the needs everyone should have them, and then people started questioning, were they really working? And now there's sort of new styles of plans evolving, sort of all-encompassing plans and green, environmentally friendly plans. What have you seen?
Yeah, so I can talk about kind of everything that's out there is such a variety. And I would agree, you know, we've evolved, I would say, almost away from calling them health plans to subscription models now. And I think that's easy for a pet owner to understand. Everyone has a subscription in their life, be it some kind of streaming platform or food or whatever it is. So a subscription model. So you kind of start on the more basic end of a pet health plan, and that will be the traditional thing. So often that includes things like parasiticides, vaccines, potentially an annual health check or a 6 monthly health check, and microchipping. That is the kind of core of a health plan. So if someone doesn't have one yet, I would say start there and just get used to running it, get used to pet owners kind of buying into it. If it's new to you, don't go in super complicated, just have one. Optimize the price for dog versus cat and sometimes rabbit as well, and the size of animal. It helps you with your pricing when it's basic because you're literally really just looking at the cost of the medication involved and the time and making that work for a practice point of view. Now we're starting to see quite a shift into different models. So seeing a lot of inclusive consult plans coming through, which really is more like a membership model to a clinic. It's quite a varied opinion out there about these models and if they work. My personal view is I think they're great. Ultimately, by removing the consult fee from a pet owner's kind of mind, they're going to present their pet to the vet more frequently. And so again, back to the welfare point, it's breaking down that barrier. People are bringing their animals in earlier, not delaying. And then from a practice point of view, it keeps them kind of wanting to come through the door. And actually, interestingly, what we see is average transaction value of each visit tends to go up. So you actually are getting more value from the pet owners coming in more as well. So that's kind of, if someone's looking to jazz up their health plan, that's something I'd look at doing. Make it applicable to your area though, and to your practice positioning. So if you're operating a business model where you're trying to be very competitive on price, kind of that lower value, I'm sure it's in still incredibly high service, but lower value offering, and inclusive consults is probably not one for you. You want to have the more kind of basic end of the plan. If you're looking to give that kind of greater service, that's when you might start looking at inclusive consults. But now we're seeing all, inclusive consults is almost in itself become run of the mill now, certainly where I'm based in London. It's very popular, that model. What I'm starting to see, which is great, is new types of plans. So things like a dental plan. We've got some practices thinking about that. Again, that's encouraging just routine preventative healthcare. That's not dental treatment. It's just your comprehensive oral health exam and treatment. So that's kind of exciting to see that come through, see how that goes. You made reference to green plans. Again, I think they're really important to think about as a practice. And interestingly, they're going to be different in terms of geography where you're based. So practices, quite a few based in the southwest, kind of more seaside locations, or those closer to large bodies of water, are starting to think about green plans because of pollution of parasiticide products in the environment. Of course, any treatment needs to be a risk-based approach, and you need to be treating the patient in front of you. But I think that's really interesting, and people are putting things like fecal screening or just general health screening instead in the green plan, and removing that blanket treatment of using parasiticides in there. Also starting to see chronic care plans. So, as pets are kind of on these chronic medications, some of these injectable medications, they might be being put onto a plan. And senior plans, kind of differentiating, what you need as a puppy or as a kind of young dog is going to be really different to an older dog. So making them a bit more bespoke to different life stages. And that speaks also to the personalization trend. Again, seeing this across not just the vet industry, but the wider market. But people particularly don't want to think that their pet is the same as anybody else's. And I can speak from my own personal experience with that. So making someone feel like their health plan, wellness plan, care plan, subscription is bespoke to their pet. The more you can do that, the better. So that, like I say, might be looking at different life stages, looking at different health conditions. When you do work with a pet health plan administrator, they should be able to guide you in terms of pricing, because the temptation might be just to look in your area and what people are charging. But you might well have different things going into your plan. Your practice running costs will be different. You might be paying a different price for your medication. So having that kind of consultative support in terms of optimizing the price is available, and should be used as much as possible.
I can see definitely the value of having somebody support you, a trusted advisor in some way, shape or form. I remember I set my plan. I did just look in the local area because at that point in time, and I took my views on what was going on there, and it would have been useful to have some guidance at the time. You talked about simplicity in knowing your clients, and then you talked about personalization. And I think there's a huge, and also you then talked about sort of almost like add-on plans, like adding dental plans on, chronic care plans. I certainly find there's a huge tension between keeping things simple, because it's simple, it's easy for the client to understand, it's easy for your staff to sell and to communicate, but it's very hard to have that simplicity, but also to have it complex and personalized and tailored and all those sort of things to make the client feel this plan's just right for them.
Yeah. So I never think you're going to have that fully personalized plan. And this is where clever marketing comes into place. You're going to have a plan for a life stage or for a size of pet. But it's making sure the person at the front desk who is probably mentioning the plan sees, oh, you've got a 4-year-old Labrador, this would be really good on our active plan for this weight. And making sure they're mentioning the right thing. In terms of the further personalization, I think bolt-ons can work quite nicely there. So making dental a bolt-on, making chronic healthcare a bolt-on. So people have to have the kind of basic plan, and then they can add on these other services if they want to and need them. And that's bespoking it a bit more. That is a challenge to run potentially, and you're opening yourself up for more error. When you go through a price rise, does that apply to all the different services and bolt-ons? Is that being executed correctly? There's going to be challenges sometimes there. But yeah, I think it works nicely with the bolt-on. The thing to be cautious about and call out, and this is now with my insurance hat on, is the blurring of the boundary between a pet house plan and an insurance product. particularly when it comes to these bolt-on things. So a pet health plan always needs to have a set value, because by doing that, you're not having this kind of open-ended what if scenario, because that's what insurance is there for. It's to cover the costs that you don't know are going to come, that you don't know are going to happen. And obviously insurance is subject to lots of different rules and regulations, FCA guidance, et cetera, et cetera. So again, just be mindful when you're designing your plan, it needs to have a set value to pet owner. And that helps you as a clinic, because then you can price it appropriately, and it needs to not have this ambiguity in terms of what's in it. And then finally, when thinking about insurance, if you are doing inclusive consults as part of your plan and someone is on that plan and wants to make an insurance claim, you can't charge for the consults. So if it was going to be free to the pet owner, you can't put it on the insurance claim. It's really important to do that. But again, if you work with an insurance company, they will be able to guide you easily on these things. Their regulatory teams are very good at this. So just ask them if you're concerned.
Okay. I say something. I think about the complexity of the plans. Not there's one thing designing them, and then it's another thing sort of setting it up so in the clinic the staff can execute the plan well with clients, and so they don't, the right drugs get sort of discounted at the right time, and it doesn't become an admin burden, an extra admin burden within the consultation. So it's another reason to keep it simpler. And so it's something I'm thinking about with the software design of Lupa. I'm thinking about how to make it easy, that the vet doesn't have, or the clinician doesn't have to think about the plan whilst they're giving out the components of the plan. And also you've got to be thinking about the reporting and have the tools to kind of go, is this actually working for me? Okay.
Yeah, I think a good PMS that kind of gives you easy access to all that data is essential. If you are working with a third-party plan administrator, a PMS that talks between the two is useful, so you're not running multiple different systems. That's how things get confused and get lost. But yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Yes. You mentioned chronic care. That's something I picked up there. And I think about the sort of CMA and pressures on medication. The chronic care plans, does that have to do with the meds, or is that more, do you think, to do with the sort of building the diagnostics and the consultations?
I think a bit of both. I think with any plan, you can't rely just on the med sales, because that's not what they're there for. They're there to also sell the rest of the services. But in that, it gives an opportunity to potentially look at bundling or pricing. I don't know. It's kind of hard to know what the CMA is going to say about all these things at the moment. But always having services on top. So diagnostics, if a pet does have a long-term health condition, they get real value from coming back into the clinic frequently. So having that built in is really good for checkups and stuff. So it's not just meds, but also probably does include meds. But again, if they've got a good lifetime insurance, they shouldn't need that plan, because that will be covered. The treatment will be covered on an ongoing basis by their insurance. So it's kind of this difficult, issue. We want people to be insured with a good insurance product, but then also practice wants to make healthcare accessible to pet owners. And the CMA wants transparency. And again, with pet health plans, the transparency can be more of an issue for independent practices, because like we've said, everyone's plans are different. So when it comes to pet owners having the ability to shop around, they can make an informed choice, but it's not comparable between practice X and practice Y down the road. So my advice would be to make sure on your website and clinic, everything's really clearly displayed, how much the plan is, how much savings they might get over the course of a time period, normally a year, what's included, what's excluded, and then people can do their own research and shop around a bit. But that's one of the suggestions from the CMA that could be challenging for independent clinics, because it's not comparing like to like.
I think there'll be a lot of challenges in that space of not being able to comparing apples and pears. Okay, so just thinking, we talked a little bit about pricing and sort of the pricing sort of challenges. What are you thinking clinics are needing to do regarding their sort of the pricing structures on many medications, but perhaps fees as well, outside of the plans, to kind of cope with what's coming online?
Now you're asking, this is such a big topic, which we could talk for hours for, I'm sure, on this alone. So I guess the first bit is just for a practice to zoom right out and understand where their revenue streams are coming from. I think that's really important. My general message, and I'll probably say this throughout, is don't panic. with what the CMA is bringing. Just we can address this as an industry, and there's lots of help out there to help people. So yeah, my first thing would be get a good accountant, ask them to kind of look at your P&L with you and understand, what percentage of the practice's revenue comes from services, from fees, what percentage comes from medication, and then you can further segment that. So I think on average, it's about 30% of income in small animal practice comes from medicine sales. And then about half of that tends to be from chronic medicine. But once you start understanding those numbers from your own clinic, and actually, again, with your PMS, you can probably pull that data more easily. Once you understand that, you can start thinking, okay, well, where are we potentially more at risk and where are we not maximizing the value? So there's been a lot of discussion about, well, if medicine prices go down, are service fees just going to go up? Yes, probably. But that might not be a bad thing. I think for years, the vet industry has probably been subsidizing their professional service fees of these incredible, expert professionals with their medicine fees. And that's where this shift, I think we're going to start to see, will come.
Yes. And there's that risk of lost income as this comes through. And then one of my other conversations I was talking about, it's not just the lost income of losing those drug sales, but the time lost. Because if clients are talking about this, then we're not, or the clinicians aren't having the opportunity to talk about the arthritis or the ear condition or dental, and so there's a further financial loss in those extra back of house opportunities that you kind of would pick up in a consultation if you weren't talking about administrative stuff.
Yeah. I mean, time is going to be a huge one again with any changes. And I think obviously this is out of scope of this discussion, but that's why the CMA is generally giving independent practices longer to make any changes that will come in, because they do recognize that it's going to be more labor intensive. But that's the kind of back end initial changes. I see what you mean about, having these conversations in clinic. Back to thinking about sort of pricing itself. Okay, so now, we've looked at the P&L, we've seen 30% of revenue is coming from med sales. What do we do now to protect that? And medicine pricing, I think it's no secret that it probably does need to change. I think that was a big driver of how the CMA investigation came about in the first place, was looking at the pricing of medication. So, now you know where to look, potentially looking more at your long-term meds. The next thing is to look really how much you pay for that product. So by this, I mean your net price. So for those of you that are part of the buying group, this is the list price, take away your wholesaler, take away the rebates, take away kind of any management fees. That's the complicated one. And, traditionally when we've priced meds in practice, we look at list price and we mark up on list price. As I said, I was in farm practice and they tend to mark up on net price, which is obviously a bit different. So I'd look at, right, this is exactly what I'm paying for this medication. And if you don't know that, either if you work directly with manufacturers, speak to the manufacturer, make sure you understand that, make sure you're looking at your wholesaler statements, but then also speak to your buying group and ensure you know that. And I know there's some work potentially being done with PMSs in terms of getting that through price into the PMS as to what someone really pays for the meds, rather than just looking at list all the time. But understand what you're actually paying. And then my advice would be to move towards looking at a margin-based pricing model rather than a markup. So by that, I mean, rather than say put 100% markup at list of something, let's look, and we want to make a 40% margin on this product, because then that you're going to retain a certain margin all the way through to your P&L, hopefully things going right. So it allows that more kind of focused, targeted approach to pricing. The margin might be different on certain medications. So you're probably going to make a much larger margin on the cheaper medications. So things like steroids, and, those can be higher margin products. Those that are more expensive, you're likely to make a lower margin on them. So you're going to have to do a bit of analysis as to where that pricing point sits. But look at that. So understand what you're paying, look at moving to a margin-based thing, and then in a much more open way, this is the money you're actually making from each product. And that can help you with forecasting, etc., and kind of purchasing decisions, stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. I remember trying to do that myself back, and it's very time consuming and hard work. And I was chatting to a colleague. Hopefully, your PMS can help you with that. But if your PMS can't help, you should be able to get the data out from your PMS. And there's a new tool, sort of Claude Cowork, that my colleague was using, and it was able to bring these data sets together in a very efficient way. So you could start to do some modeling. You could interact with it and ask it questions and say, what happens if I change my margin here? And it took the spreadsheets from basic level to be on steroids, which I'd encourage some people to look at if they're trying to do these calculations, along with getting sort of expert sort of support in doing this.
I'd like to have a play with that tool. It sounds fun. I didn't do pricing when I was in clinic. I wasn't the practice owner. So it's only more recently that I've been exposed to that. And I was surprised that PMSs only gave you the functionality, or one PMS only gave you the functionality to do a markup on this price. It's so restrictive. And I think a good PMS will allow you to look at it in different ways. So that should help, hopefully, make it a bit easier. But it's complex. Pricing is really complex. And that's part of the issue, is that your assistant vets, so speaking as someone who's an assistant and a non-practice owner, may well not understand why medicines are priced the way they are. And that lack of transparency to your assistant vets can make them feel a little bit more uncomfortable in justifying prices and having those discussions. So if you're a business owner and you feel comfortable and happy to do so, and you have much more experience than I do on this, but if you feel happy to do so, teaching your staff, vets, nurses, even front of house, how you get to the price points you do for your medication, where that money goes into the practice, how much it costs to run a business, that kind of thing, I think all might help people feel less embarrassed and more justified as to why these things cost. I don't know if you ever had those discussions with your assistant vets.
No, I did. I had as a young business owner, I had a talk from a gentleman called Pete Orpin many years ago, and he told me the fact that the average clinic doesn't start making in a year. If you put all the costs against the income, the average clinic doesn't start making money until they get to December. So the rest of the year is covering all the costs. And he said that was quite a nice analogy. Or you say, well, it doesn't start making any money until 5:30 in the afternoon. And so that last consult that the vet turns away because for whatever reason, that's the one that actually makes the profit on a daily basis. And just, I think, helping understand what proportions of cost the business, where they come from. I think we were talking earlier, we talked about how with the CMA coming along, clients are going to be asking questions, they're going to challenge us. There's been a lot of press that hasn't been too favourable against us. And the staff are at the front line for that. And so helping them feel confident, helping them understand how the business works. And I think you talked about giving them the words, sending them on courses so they feel equipped to have those conversations.
Yeah, so I think they're always difficult. It's tough discussing money, particularly for British people. We seem to get really awkward when it comes to discussing money. But I think there's kind of 4 ways you can help your staff with this. So that transparency point that we've just discussed, and I really like Pete's analogy of that. I actually saw him recently speak on that topic, and I think he said it was 14th of November that now the practice starts making money. And I thought, I would have loved to know that when I was in practice. It would be really useful. So yeah, transparency to your vets, but also encouraging them to be transparent to owners. So of course, everyone does already, or if they don't, they're going to have to give really clear estimates on the cost of treatment. I'd always include the higher end and kind of focus potentially on the higher end, because if the actual cost comes in under that, very good. If you've kind of been more conservative on your estimate and it comes in above, then you start to have some conflicts and issues. The transparency with your vets and with your owners. Confidence, like you just said, there's courses people can go on. It's all about communication skills and building their own clinical confidence as well, particularly with younger vets and nurses, that they are very justified to charge this way for their professional time. The work they do is incredible and what they know is amazing. So building up their confidence to deliver that. I think language is a critical one. So again, people start to feel awkward. They might use apologetic language like, oh, I'm sorry, or, or unfortunately, it's going to cost this much. Strip that away. You don't need to apologize. That's just the fact of what it is. The other deflection mechanism is often humor. So we've probably all said it, and here's the bad news, it's going to cost this, and you're deflecting. But with both of those uses of language, it's kind of giving attention to the fact that price is an issue here, and making the pet owner aware that you, as the person delivering the news, feels uncomfortable with it, so they should feel uncomfortable with it. Just changing that language, stripping it back, making it really factual. And then finally, making sure the right person has that conversation about cost to the pet owner. Where possible, having it in the consult room, making them aware before they leave, this is exactly how much it's going to be. Again, if you're kind of using your PMS well and putting stuff in, hopefully you're seeing that tot up as you go through the consult. But it gives the pet owner then the chance to ask the person delivering the treatment, okay, are there any alternatives? If it's coming to that, can we do this? That kind of thing. The vet or nurse will understand why something costs a certain way. But if you leave it to your front of house staff, they might not get it completely, but also they're probably going to be delivering that news in front of a whole waiting room full of pet owners. So if there is going to be any conflict, it's going to be viewed by everyone in the practice. So it's not that they're closed door conversations. There's going to be much more transparency with the publishing of prices on websites. And again, there are excellent tools, I know, coming to the market to help with that kind of thing. But yeah, having these conversations in the appropriate way, with the appropriate person at the appropriate time, using the right language is really critical.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. They're definitely equipping and supporting them so they can have those conversations. I was also thinking about the time pressures that these conversations are going to take. If there's anything you can do to take some of those conversations outside of the consulting room, that may well help the vets, because if you can inform the clients in a way of costs before they come in, then it's the clients are already aware of stuff, and giving them the tools in the PMS and outside the PMS so that they can have easy access. So if your pricing is simple, they can easily quote and they can create estimates rather than having to look things up. So yeah, give them the tools and try and take things out of that consulting room time frame, because that's also where they can provide extra value to the clients as well, rather than going into nitty-gritties on the pricing.
Yeah, I guess even things like using AI note takers and stuff, that's going to be capturing their notes and what they've discussed as they go along. So then when it comes to wrapping up the consult and probably needing to look about what they're going to administer, it's kind of more there for them. I haven't used one since I was in clinic, but yeah, I think your PMS working well and working for you should help on that time saving piece.
Yeah, I know takers, I think, I'm brilliant. I use them myself when I'm working, decrease my stress, improve my communication to the client, and the fact they can create a summary to give the client to go home with, so they have a clear view of the plan. Things I always intended to do, like I always knew I wanted to give the client a plan, but I had to get to the next client, and so I never actually I'll drop an email later, and either I didn't do it or I was there at 9 p.m. at night writing them an email. But don't producing that quick summary to give the client, this is what I'm thinking about happening next time you come in. And these are the potential costs that again, it's transparency, and the clients, it saves time in the long term.
Yeah. And it's personalization again. Sometimes you get these fact sheets that might be produced for you. So you've diagnosed a dog with arthritis. Here's a fact sheet about arthritis, but by giving that summary, it's, well, here's a fact sheet about your dog's arthritis and your case and how we're treating it. That's amazing service to be given.
Yeah, and I guess that moves on to the last part of this conversation, which is about sort of marketing and reputation, sort of managing that sort of client relationship.
Yeah, so I'm a vet turned marketeer, so this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. Yeah, client relationships is critical to a business's success, and I think we need to kind of breathe and put behind us everything that's been said in the media, and kind of move forward now as an industry together and see the opportunities that have come out of this. Particularly, I think it's really exciting for independent practices. So when it comes to marketing, we kind of split this into external marketing and internal marketing, and obviously those are fairly self-explanatory. So external marketing is about building your relationship with clients, future clients, ex-clients. There is quite a lot of innovation and competition in the vet market at the moment, which is great, but it means that no longer is the situation, set up a practice, open your doors, people will come because you're the vet in that location. People are shopping around a bit more. So not for the first time, but practices are now increasingly thinking about marketing. So with any marketing, it's really important that you convey your message and your purpose and what makes you different as a practice. Ultimately, that's often linked to your people. So who works for you, what specialities they have, what particular interest do they have, who are they as people, kind of sharing that kind of stuff. But then also as a business, what kind of kit do you have in the practice? What experience or what developments, what cool things do you have in the practice? Because that might explain, if you've got a CT scanner in practice, you might be a little bit more expensive than another that doesn't, and that's perfectly justifiable. But you need to share that. So that's all marketing. And then there's the fun stuff as well. Yeah, getting to know who you are as people, that sort of thing. So in terms of then how you're delivering that to clinics, again, I think through your PMS, you can do direct comms often, kind of keeping in touch, that personal touch with people. Social media is both a blessing and a curse, I would say. Again, yeah, it's a whole webinar topic in itself, social media marketing. But when it comes to social media, my one fallout would be, don't necessarily let the person who spends the most time on social media run the practice social media account, because they may well be, but they might not be the one that understands what message the business is trying to convey and how they're wanting to position themselves in the market. They might be more influenced by potentially any kind of trends that are going on, and that stuff's great if you want to go viral. But as a business for long term, you don't really want to go viral across the whole of the UK or the world. You want to appeal to your demographic in your area. So yeah, fun things like a dental walkthrough, showing a pet as they go through the journey of a dental, kind of through induction, procedure, recovery, that kind of thing gives the behind the scenes look, but it shows your expertise. And I guarantee more people will understand why a dental costs what it does. So that's the thing.
I was on a talk on Monday, and there was a clinician talking about he's got client present inductions. So
yes, yeah,
and I'd heard about it, but I'd never actually heard someone who actually was doing it, and everything's very open. And he talked about just how it takes away the fear. It shows the value, it shows the skill, and I went from being a skeptic, going, okay, yeah, actually I can see how this really does work. But that's part of the communication, that showing, being open up and showing the value. A lot of clinics won't show what's behind sort of the inpatient door. And if that's what's distinguishing you, you've got to tell that story and let people see it.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's actually really interesting as a pet owner. These are their babies, they want to see where they're going, and clinics look really nice. Your clinic will likely be clean unless there's been loads of emergencies, probably quite tidy. Share that with people. They're interested to see. And, for the clinic doing owner present inductions, that's a big USP of theirs. And I know that they talk about it quite a lot with pet owners, and that's differentiating their business. So great that they're doing it, great they're talking about it. And it's obviously, really working for them. So yeah, that's kind of marketing your messaging. I think your brand is really important. Again, this is a huge topic, but what does your brand say about you? How do people connect with who you are as a practice? Again, let's take the focus off price. If everything was always about price, there actually wouldn't be much competition. People make a choice because of how a brand and experience with a brand makes them feel, what motivates them. Is it kind of prestige? Is it convenience? Is it kind of different things? So making sure your messaging aligns with what your differentiation and USP is, and your brand reflects that. And then also just finally understanding your customers is critical. So a bit of market research, having some focus groups sometimes with owners, really useful. Understand why they come to your practice. If you can reach out to previous clients, why they might have left, always useful to understand. You'll probably get some negative feedback. Don't focus on that. Particularly when it comes to costs, but use it as a mechanism to drive growth. So understand your customers, critical.
Yes, I think we also talked. I agree with all that. I thought we also talked about sort of internal marketing, of sort of making sure that brand message is understood by your team, so they are aligned in your position.
Yeah, I mean, it's all well and good having this fabulous mission statement that kind of you put out to the world, but if that's not reflected in how you treat your staff, then I would say it's not really true. So internal marketing is all about your staff, keeping them happy, keeping them loyal. We've said it a lot. There's been a real challenge with what's gone on with the CMA. People on the front line have had to face a lot of difficulties. So I would say things like having really protected one-to-one time as the business leader, as the boss, making sure that you have whatever you can, but keep that formal protected time to have one-to-one with your staff, making sure they can talk about any issues. That's kind of good internal marketing. And considering the different pressures they're going to be faced by different staff members. We were discussing a bit beforehand about, how a new graduate might be facing quite different challenges to that's when I graduated, when you graduated. The world has changed so much, so be mindful of that, be empathetic, don't underplay the impact of growing up in a kind of social media world that is going to have them in a litigious world. So looking after your new graduates as well, really important.
Okay. Well, that's fantastic. I've really, really enjoyed our conversation, Flo. Thank you for spending the time with me now. I hope you've enjoyed it, what you've heard, and just in some of the things I'm taking away is kind of know your clients, know your figures, use the right tools to get to know where you stand, know and bring your team along on this journey so they can communicate to your clients, and get an expert to help you. Are kind of my takeaways from this. I want to thank you again, Flo, and I want to thank Vetsure for their support and sort of to the industry as well. And if you want to know any more, please do reach out to either Lupa or Vetsure. Ask us questions about our products, but also questions about some of these challenges, and we're happy to talk about them and see if we can help you.
Thank you so much for having me, Nick. It's been great.